So good morning, everyone. This is Coffee and Conversation. We have our panel speakers are here. Our participants are logging in, our attendees. And we'll wait just maybe one more minute to give everyone time to log in before we start the program. Okay. So we will jump right in. So good morning, everyone. This is Coffee and Conversation presented by the Cal Poly CIE SBDC. And this morning, we're super stoked to have three of our investors from AngelCon 2021. I'll introduce them each in just a minute. But basically today, what we're going to talk about and cover is the AngelCon process and talk to our investors who are going to share their experience in the program, and also give us some insights on why they selected the company that they did. They invested $145,000 in Tally4, and so we want to know why. So we'll dig into that as well. So the SBDC, we're one of 1,000 locations in the U.S. We serve San Luis Obispo County. We work with close to 500 companies every year. We have a pool of 33 consultants who provide one-on-one coaching to our companies. So if you have any interest in joining the SBDC, it is free to you as the business owner, as the entrepreneur. We're funded by the SBA, and we use that funding, that grant money, to pay our consultants to work with you. Last year and the year before, on average, we helped our companies connect with between 20 to $35 million in capital funding every year. So we're pretty good at connecting companies with funding, be it through angel funding, venture funding, as we're going to discuss today. We're also working with our banks, with our community banks locally. So feel free to reach out. We're also funded by GoBiz at the state level, so not just the SBA. Thank you to our sponsors, and a quick little video from one of our key sponsors, Maynard Cooper.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jamal Al-Haj, and I'm a partner with Maynard Cooper and Gale in the firm's San Francisco office. Maynard Cooper is a full-service law firm of national reach with over 300 lawyers across 11 offices coast to coast. Our San Francisco practice focuses on advising emerging growth companies and venture capital firms, including with respect to equity management, financings, employment, and intellectual property matters. We are extremely proud to be a Founders Circle sponsor amongst an extraordinary circle of other dedicated philanthropists who recognize the immense value that Cal Poly's Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship bring to the SLO community. We hope that each of you enjoys this upcoming training and workshop and are able to incorporate the knowledge and know-how that will be presented shortly to further help grow, develop, and accelerate your businesses.
Okay, thank you to our sponsor. So now for our panel speakers, I'm super stoked to introduce everyone to Kristen Wilkinson, John Hanna, and Mitch Emerson. Thank you all for being here. So just as a quick, sharing the background to how this is coming together. We launched Fund 4 in September of 2020. We brought on board 30 investors who invested into this fund. Each investor put in $5,000 into a fund. We then met with our investors on a monthly basis between September all the way through June. And we went through different processes about, learning and increasing our knowledge about investing in startups. We had speakers come in from the Bay Area. We met every month, once a month. And in January, we began to review applications from startups that wanted to apply to be considered for an investment. The investment group narrowed it down to their top 6 startups. The top 6 pitched at AngelCon last week. And our investors selected the winning startup and invested $145,000 into the winning startup. Prior to doing that, the investors spent 46 weeks doing some due diligence. We had six subgroups of investors that interviewed the startups, the top 6 startups, and really got in the weeds. Talked to the founders, visited their workspace, talked to their customers, reviewed their contracts, and really gathered all the data necessary to make a well-informed decision on who to invest in. So it was a pretty intensive process, but I think our investors did a formidable job and selected Tally4 and invested $145,000 in Tally4. So we're going to talk about that. But before we do, I'd like each of our panel speakers to introduce themselves and give us a couple minute background sort of overview on your career and how you came about to connecting with AngelCon. And then we'll get into a more open discussion about the process that you just went through. And of course, this is completely open to Q&A. So all of you who are on this morning, please feel free to drop some questions into the Q&A box, and I'll feed them to our panel. So Kristen, let's start with you. Welcome, and please give us a little bit of background info about you and where you're coming from.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. First of all, thanks for having me. I joined the AngelCon 2021 group a little bit late in the game, so I still have a ton of catch up and learning to do. But I'm super excited to be here. My name is Kristen. Most people call me Kiki. I'm a SLO local. I grew up in Cambria and moved down to Santa Barbara. Was up in San Francisco and I'm back here now. I spent the last almost decade working for Airbnb, helping to scale their trust and safety team. I founded their trust and safety training team and scaled that department approximately 13x during my time there. I'm now consulting and focused on helping local small businesses scale intentionally. And I'm also supporting a few larger companies, currently a global food delivery company, and integrating a new anti-discrimination training program that couples employee resilience and wellness with trust and safety related training or challenging training topics. So that's my background. Oh, sorry, Judy, I think you're muted.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for the intro. John, good morning. Welcome.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. So my wife and I, we are transplants from the San Francisco Bay Area. We currently live in Santa Barbara. Spent most of my career up in the San Francisco Bay Area working for a high-tech company. And in 2015, left the company retired from that company and started focusing on real estate. So since then, we've been focused on many different aspects of real estate. And so we got introduced to the AngelCon through someone that was associated with it, and just learned so much and just had a really, really great time and very informative.
Thanks, John. Good to have you. Mitch, good morning.
Good morning. Hi, thanks. So my name is Mitch Emerson. I went to Cal Poly in the 90s and then graduated and worked at Cisco Systems. I started there in development, and then eventually went through sales and marketing and then into competitive intelligence or corporate strategy. And then I moved to Juniper Networks and did corporate strategy there, and then eventually started my own software company with a partner. And then moved back down to San Luis Obispo. I got introduced to AngelCon late last year. A friend that was in it, this is my first year in the fund. It sounded interesting. I'd been interested in investing outside of like traditional methods and looking at, doing other startups and things like that and investing kind of locally. And so it sounded like a fun opportunity, and that's what got me interested here. So
great. Thanks for joining us, Mitch.
Sure.
And part of, I think it's so great to share your backgrounds, because I just want to showcase also that we're a very pretty diverse group, from all stages of life, and it's never too late or too early to learn about investing in startups. It's a $5,000 commitment into the fund, and it's just a great way to, I had one investor in one fund say, "Oh, I feel like I just got an MBA in startup investing." So just a good way to develop your knowledge and also be part of connect with a great network of local people who are really committed in supporting local startups. So thank you so much for being with us. So we'll launch right in. So let's talk about what happened at AngelCon. So the investment group decided to invest in Tally4. So I'll just throw it out there. Why Tally4? What supported? What prompted? What were the key factors that sealed the deal for you? So let's start with you, Mitch.
So for me, it was tough. Tally4 wasn't the company that I was researching. I was researching another one. And they were all great companies. But the thing with Tally4, what was interesting was that they had a very useful and unique solution for tax preparation. And it was a couple guys. I see Peter on the call here. They really were successful in getting some traction with their solution. They had shown that between, he and his brother, they were able to get the business up and going, get customers signed on, get revenue. And that was one of the real interesting things. When you look at when you look at investing in a small startup company, it's different than like when you look at, investing in a stock or a big company, because a lot of it's not necessarily a proven technology or a proven product or a proven concept, but you're really looking at, do the people that are running this company, do I think that they have what it takes? And have they shown that they have what it takes in order to grow this company and succeed? And that's one of the big things. And I was really impressed with that with Tally4.
Thank you. And so just to give some people, maybe some people have not seen AngelCon, to give them a little bit of background. So Tally4, as you explained, they developed a solution to basically file your taxes. And for CPAs, it has taken their workload, or the time and effort in doing the work, from 3 to 4 hours of work to complete all the forms for their clients, all the tax forms that need to be filed on an annual basis, down to a 7-minute process, in the sense that they have been able to develop the software to automate filling out the forms once the software platform is integrated with their QuickBooks or their whatever accounting software that they're using. It's a pretty impressive, we all saw the demo, very impressive system. Kristen, what was your take on what prompted your investment decision in Tally4?
Yeah, so I also was on a different due diligence team. So I was looking into a different company, which I think it does make it a little bit difficult, because you go into a company and you're rooting for them. All of these companies were so great, and they all had so many amazing ideas and solutions to problems. And Tally4 did have, I would say, more traction than a lot of the other companies. And not only more traction, but it seemed like they got that traction with, it's two people. it's two guys, and they've done a lot over the past year, really. And I think the other thing, I was thinking about this the other day when I was preparing for this conversation and the questions that might come. And I haven't fully articulated my vision as far as what I'm investing for and the reasons. But I have to say, Tally4, throughout the due diligence process and what was presented for Tally4, also the demo was extremely supportive, I think, in the education on the investor side of what does this product actually do. I'm not a tax person. I'm also not a finance person. I don't do numbers. Math is not my thing. That's my partner. But they made it really simple. They took a difficult, I did not really understand what their product was when they first pitched it. And then throughout this process of talking with them and even not being a part of the due diligence team, but seeing the outcome and having them come and, Peter came and chatted with us and answered questions. And I think that was so incredibly helpful. I think there's something to be said for the character of the people that are building these companies. I think back to all the different CEOs and co-founders and company founders that I've either worked with that have branched off and gone and been super successful, or well-known companies that are around. They all have something magical. They all have this magic, and I don't quite know how to put that into words yet. So I'm working on that as a new investor, but a lot of these companies had that. Tally4 really just, they had it. You could see that they were determined. You could see where they were headed. They had a very clear vision. They really succinctly showed the problem, the solution, and how their solution is the best solution. And it just made sense. It made sense in my head. So, yeah, but there were.
So basically, the team, we talk about that a lot, the strength of the team. And here it's the 2-person team, Peter and Ben, two brothers that are insanely driven. So it just reiterates the importance of having that strong team in place that you can see is going to be able to execute, right? And then they proved that by showcasing some of their traction. John, any other insights on the selection of Tally4?
Yeah, so sort of the interesting path that we were on, and I think I certainly really benefited from the training that we got on the front end, and the one takeaway that really stuck with me was focus on the people as much or more than the product. Because when we first got the presentation, literally every time we got a presentation afterwards, I'm like, they're the one, that's who I want to invest in. And I kept doing that, like, oh my God, I just saw 6 presentations. There's no way, they're all good. How do you know? So then once we started the due diligence process and really started walking down the path and really started focusing on not only the product, but the team, some things became very obvious. And I think the maturity of the team of Tally4 and really the ability to take this product to the next level and all that includes, from a connection, networking, just business acumen. I mean, it checked all the boxes as far as what the team was able to do with this product.
That's yeah. It is interesting, that focus on the we talk about it all the time, but you saw it in practice. The founders is so key. What I was going to ask, well, I'm wondering, okay, on the other side of the spectrum, this is where I'm going. Well, one point I did want to make, I think you both brought it up, Kiki and John, is sometimes some companies think that they can only pitch to investors who understand their industry and understand the technology, the innovation. But you both made an interesting comment that regardless of that knowledge, they were able to simplify and actually really explain in a very simple way what they were doing, and it didn't faze you. Because they did such a good job putting that forward. So that's an interesting for founders who, not to make that assumption that people have to have the tech knowledge to be interested in what they're doing. So I think that's an important takeaway. So on the other side of the spectrum, what were the startups that you saw where you saw some key areas that were definitely a big red flag for you, or things that you were just like, this is just not, this is just definitely a non-starter? Or John, do you want to take the leap on that one first?
Yeah, and without going into specific details, we saw some red flags in some of the due diligence that we did, and some things that maybe were most obvious to us, that a particular chain of events that had to happen that we felt they should have been more on top of, really was a flag that, okay, they have a good product, but maybe they're not quite ready yet. And it needs a little bit more time to mature. So it was more of a function of, time to market and the ability to take it to market in a reasonable time frame.
So does that go to the whole traction? Is that what you're referring to? That there's just not enough traction yet? Not
But it was actually more than traction. It was anticipating huge craters that were coming down the path that, that we saw as they felt like it was maybe not as big of a deal as we did. And so therefore, we felt like, okay, with a little bit more maturing, we think that the team will anticipate these things better. But yeah.
Mhm. Mitch, do you want to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. So, kind of to John's point, it was funny because I was a little bit conflicted because there's a few companies that I thought, okay, these guys are a little bit too early. But then I was thinking, well, angel investing, you're supposed to be early. That's the whole point of it. But, having started and run a company myself, there is kind of like John had mentioned, you see some things that, are going to come down the pipe. That if the founders aren't aware of or aren't really addressing, it is a red flag issue. A couple examples are like, the company that I looked at, I really, really wanted to like. They had a brilliant product. It was smart people. I thought the technology was solid, but the flaw was that they didn't really have an idea of what particular market they were going to go into and how they were going to sell this thing. And that one was kind of a big thing because I know sometimes that can kill a product and kill a business if you don't take it out to the right market. Another red flag was, when you look at investing, you want to invest in companies that you think have a lot of growth potential and have some sort of exit strategy. There's companies that are called, lifestyle companies where they kind of go and they might make money, but there's not really like the opportunity for them to get acquired or for them to go IPO or for them to get bigger to get a return on the investment. And so there were some products like that also where you look at it and you go, this is a great idea, but I don't see a big long range potential for it.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
another... Funny, if can I touch on that for a sec? So, when we work with these startups, often they think it's just a kind of a bit of a mood exercise because it seems so far off and it seems like such a a pie in the sky thing. But I always it's hard to get them to wrap their head around the exit strategy slide, which is no, it is important because you have to set that vision, even if it's 10 years from now. What's going on in the market? Who's acquiring who within your industry? To give investors the inspiration, right? To make sure the investors know that that's the way you're thinking, and even if it does seem pie in the sky, it doesn't matter. At least it sets a vision, right?
Yeah, very much so, and it's hard because at that point, you're talking to people who are talking about starting a company, and you're asking them, well, how are you going to finish this company? And it's kind of counterintuitive. And it does take some people by surprise, but it is an important part, when you're pitching to investors. And that's one thing, that I think a lot of companies learn. And I know I had trouble with when I was running my company. It's like, okay, I'm doing great. I want to grow, but where is this going to go? And eventually, when am I going to step out of the game? When am I going to know that point, to turn it over to something else?
Thanks, Mitch. And John, did you want to jump in?
I just, a funny analogy, and I like the way Mitch phrased it as far as just starting a company. It's almost like you just gave birth to a baby and you need to talk about sending them off to college kind of thing.
And what their master's is going to be. You have to identify the master's right now before they can speak. What are they going to be?
That's what came to mind for me.
Yeah, but it is true. That is a struggle. Like the word I was looking for earlier was, it seems so futile, right? You're just starting something and already you're asking me to explain how I'm going to get acquired. Yeah. Kristen, any other red flags that you thought were a turnoff from an investment perspective?
I have so many things to say. I could talk about this topic forever. Let's see. So at least it's coffee and conversations and not drinks and conversation, or cocktails and conversation. Then we'd be talking all evening. Let's see. So many things to say. I think something that both John and Mitch touched on is the fact that some people are able to identify, this is my problem, this is my solution, this is my exit strategy, this is the whole picture. Now, knowing that that might shift and change depending on what happens, being able to clearly articulate what are you going to do, right? Like, I remember when I started at Airbnb, and I will never forget standing in the hallway. I had to pee so bad, and I had just met Brian Chesky, and I also didn't know who he was because he was much shorter in stature than my 6-foot frame, and I was not prepared because most of my interactions with him were on Zoom. But I'll never forget in that hallway, and mind you, at this point, I've told my parents, yeah, we're gonna create this thing where strangers can stay in other strangers' homes and sleep in their beds and use their toilet. And, it's gonna be great. It's really gonna be big. And I remember everyone in my life being like, this is a terrible idea. I don't know what you've gotten yourself into. And in that hallway, Brian was looking at me, and he was so excited. And he was like, do you realize what we're doing here? And now, not everything that he said in that hallway came true, but he was very firm on his understanding of what the issue was, what his solution was, and what unique aspects or characteristics of his solution were going to be points of difference, and how he was going to take the difficulty of that, strangers living in strangers' homes, sleeping in strangers' beds, and actually flip it on its head and say, travel like a local, make sure everyone belongs, create inclusivity. Man, the Kool-Aid there was really easy to drink. And Peter and his brother just had that. And so I know that wasn't the question, but I had to put all that out there real quick. They just had
that's
that.
important, actually, because that's, again, okay, so it's not a red flag, it's the opposite, right? It's the opposite. That team, and the team who's able to set that vision. As leaders, you're the leader. You have to bring this, you're gonna have to build out this company. You have to make sure everyone you hire is on board and sees the vision just in the same way you did. Yeah.
And it is, I think, going back to John's analogy, I think going to the red flag side, and using the analogy of having a baby, I'm right in the middle of this, right? I have a 2-year-old and a 6-year-old, and having kids, first of all, I have no idea what they're going to be when they grow up. But if I had to do this, I would sit down and I'd start, and I'd identify all these, it's a SWOT analysis, right? You go through and you do the SWOT analysis. You're like, okay, I think this is where we should go. You create all those goals, you create that long-term vision. And I think some people have the ability to synthesize that and go in just, 5 minutes, be able to express to you the world change that you will see when you use this product. When it goes to market, this is how it's going to change the world. And there were some companies, and I think the red flag for me was where the confidence wasn't there. Like, there were moments where Peter would interrupt an investor and go, whoa, you got the wrong idea. That's not what our product is. This is what the product is, or this is what we're doing. And it wasn't in a bad way. It was in a very passionate, whoa, that's the wrong direction. Like, let's recenter on what our product is and what we're going to do with it, and the difference it will make. And that was, no matter what the conversation was, no matter if it was during the pitch, during a conversation, in a networking, area, no matter what it was, it's the confidence in that vision, or the lack thereof.
Yeah.
And
that brings something that interesting I want to run by John and Mitch too. did you have to be, was the innovation important to you? How innovative does the product or the service have to be? And how do you qualify that? That's a more of a maybe slightly more philosophical question, but what do you think about that?
So that's a good question. And it's funny because a lot of times when you look at new companies, people always think new company, new technology. It's got to be something innovative. It's got to be something fantastic. And I was actually having this discussion with another friend just yesterday over coffee. Um, and and I don't think it has to be necessarily new innovation. It doesn't have to be anything that is surprisingly outstanding, because honestly, there's a lot of boring problems to solve out there. And things that don't take technology and things that don't take something fancy and shiny. And that's important to remember. And I think a lot of times, people look at, well, I want to invest in this hot new technology. Technology and innovation also has a lot of potential roadblocks to it. It's difficult, it's hard. There's things that you don't know about. And sometimes
I think I want to touch on one real quick, VR, virtual reality.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been hearing now probably for at least, I don't know, 5-6 years, it's the next new hot thing, but it's just, so I'm not, I know it's developing, it's happening, but it's been 6 years. It's not like we're all wearing our goggles every night, to watch our shows or whatever it is we want to do. Yep. But it hasn't happened yet.
Right.
So that's an example that's pretty striking to me, where we keep thinking VR and it's just not happening. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And at Cisco Systems, when I started working there, I was working in some networking technology that used optical equipment. It was for optical networking, which was really cool. And I thought, wow, this is neat. And then I found out that optical technology was developed in the 1950s at Bell Labs. So this was 45 years later, and we were still having trouble finding a market for it. So sometimes the hottest technologies are not necessarily the best businesses. There's a difference between something that can generate money and growth and return and solve a problem, and something that's, wow, fancy.
So you just touched on something pretty interesting, right? What's the revenue model? So, okay, so once you found your amazing founders, they have the vision, the drive, there's a bit of traction. Would you consider, John, is that the next element, seeing the revenue model, looking at the projections, and that's another interesting exercise when you're looking at those projections. What are you looking for really? Because we know projections are projections. They're probably wrong. I mean, we expect them to be wrong. And that's another conversation I have with founders on a daily basis. Why am I doing this? I don't know. But when you're looking at projections, what are you looking for?
So for me, the first place to start is the articulation of the available market. And so multiple times companies came out and said, our market's this big. And, we're like, really? You really think it's that big? And when asked, show your math, it was sort of funny math. It was kind of, well, we did this, 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 and this, and that's why we think it's that number. So I think the first place to start is how big is the market? And then I think the second place is, who else is in that market? What share do they have, and what share do you think you can acquire in best case scenario? So you start doing that math and you get to a number pretty quickly that is either acceptable or not. And is this, the risk reward kind of thing? Are you going to be rewarded for the risk that you're taking by a market that's big enough and their share of that market is significant enough?
Yeah. No, that's good. And that's something, that's always the advice I like to give, is the numbers within themselves don't necessarily matter, but how you got to those numbers is crucial. What was the analysis that was done to get to the number that you're proposing here in your slides? Yeah. Mitch, did you want to add something?
Yeah, the funny thing about that, I know, a lot of times, like with startups, when they're coached on how to make their pitches, You know, everybody says you got to show a hockey stick in your revenue. You got to show growth, but it's got to be believable. And that's one of the things, you know, and I remember looking at some of the companies, especially some of the early ones that we looked at that we kind of rejected right away, you know, where they showed like this year they had, you know, $0 in revenue, but next year it was going to be $1.5 million, you know, in the first 6 months or whatever. And yeah, you've got the hockey stick, but to John's point, you've got to justify why those numbers are there, and it's got to be believable. So it's not just showing the hockey stick.
Yeah.
And that was something that was interesting, you know, going through looking at the different companies. And again, with Tally4, you know, I think they had a believable model. They showed that they could get the traction. And kind of back to what we were mentioning earlier, you know, about whether it's innovative or new technology. And, you know, I don't want to downplay them at all, but, you know, doing taxes is nothing really exciting. You know, it's not like VR. And they found a problem that needed to be solved. And I remember in our discussions, we were thinking, well, how come what they're doing is unique? You know, what is it that makes it unique? And when we dug in, we found it is a hard problem to solve. It's not fancy technology, you know, it's smart. And they did it, you know, a great way, but it wasn't flashy, glitzy. And, you know, that's what looked like it had the potential to grow for a real business.
I was going to touch on that. I mean, the founders do a really great job. They start with their pitch with, I think the tagline is, we want to make taxes fun or something. I mean, because they know, I mean, they're basically, they're trying to break through that wall right out the bat. Is like, okay, we're going to talk about taxes. Not many people, you know, it's not an area that people get necessarily super excited about. But let's address that hurdle. But Mitch and Kristen, actually, you know, all of you, I wanted to ask Mitch, back to you. You mentioned about, you know, you gave the example of the startup that is going from $0 in revenue to $1 million. Does your experience as a founder of a startup in technology give you that background, ability to do that reality check and be like, okay, hang on, you know, I've done this. I know how this goes.
In my early pitches, it was the exact same. When we were planning our company, we ended up bootstrapping it. But we did go out and look for some investment. But I remember making the investment pitches like, oh, we have 0 customers this year. We're going to have 20 next year. That's our target, 20 customers. And, you know, we're going to go from, you know, we've got a few dollars in revenue to, you know, these big numbers. And it's easy to convince yourself when you're in that position of a startup, because you do have, you know, that energy, that excitement, and that belief in your product and your company. So it's not completely misguided when, you know, startup founders do that. But it is, after going through it and after looking at other companies do it, you do get a bit of realism. And it kind of teaches you, you know, how to filter through what is just the excitement and the, hey, I want to show something good so that I can, you know, get some funding, and what is like a realistic plan. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. Kristen, on that note too, did your experience with Airbnb gives you, does that give you some knowledge and background where you're able to have that, do that reality check?
Yeah, definitely. I think going back to the innovation, I mean, well, yes, on the reality check, but also on the innovation side, I totally agree with Mitch. I don't see innovation as something new and flashy and shiny always. I think being innovative in any space is being able to come in, listen to a ton of different diverse perspectives, and then being able to think outside of the box, creative problem solving, right? So a perfect example of that was Tally4. You know, what, like Mitch said, it wasn't flashy, it wasn't all those things, but it got the job done. It addressed an issue that was difficult to solve, and it addressed it in a way that no one had ever, you know, thought of, or if anyone had, they couldn't achieve it like Peter and his brother did. So, but yeah, I think, you know, my background, we were talking about this before this call started. We were talking about intuition and, you know, listening to your intuition and listening to, you know, that gut feeling. And I've been talking about this for years with my husband, and I finally have gotten him on board with it. But there's something to be said when meeting with each of these different companies. listening to them talk about their project or their idea or their solve or their long-term visions, you can tell where they're not confident or where they, you can tell where their magic is, and you can tell where their magic, where they have opportunity. And I think it's really easy to kind of come in as an outsider who doesn't know the product, hasn't been working on it, hasn't been dreaming about it, hasn't been, doing all these things forever. It's a lot easier to have that perspective and come in and go, oh, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And all of a sudden, you have these innovative ideas that can create something magical, right? And I think Peter did a really good job of expressing that. Some of the other companies, I think, had a really hard time expressing how they were going to get to that big picture. And so that's where, for me, like I said before, the financial aspect was so incredibly interesting to me. 80% of the time I didn't fully understand it. But 20% of the time, Janice or Mitch or, someone would show up with a cap table, which I still don't fully understand. But as we talked through it, it was like, oh, that makes sense to me, or that doesn't, right? Like, it's pretty easy to see when someone is showing you data in a really clear way. This is where we are. This is what we have done. This is what other companies have done. This is what we plan to do. These are the points of difference. This is how we will get from here to there. But it's not all about, yes, the money is part of it. The ideas are part of it, but it's the integration of all of it, right? Like all of these aspects that we're talking about. I'm thinking back.
When you're saying trusting your gut, at the end of the day, what you're saying is being able to look at the macro pictures, like, does it make sense?
Does it make sense? Are all the puzzle pieces here? Yeah, you can't.
Are the elements there?
Yeah. If you're looking at a puzzle and you're creating this beautiful, painting, but you have a bunch of pink puzzle pieces, it's not going to work.
Right. It doesn't fit. Yeah.
And that's kind of some of those golf clubs. What'd you call it? Hockey sticks?
Hockey stick.
Not my magic. Golf club, hockey sticks. I don't know. Sports also not my thing. I did hit a golf ball for the first time the other day though. But I think being able to sit down, even if parts of these areas aren't people's magic, whether it's the CEO or the investor or someone else, it's being able to be coachable, listen to other perspectives, have a growth mindset, be able to kind of sit in different perspectives. Because I find that even if you don't agree with the perspective, like there were multiple times throughout AngelCon that I was like, this person just cares about money. And then I was like, oh, well, it is investment.
Yeah.
Kind of an important thing to care about.
On that note, we do have a question in the Q&A that I want to address because I think it's a really important question, actually. As investors, when you're making an investment, do you want to make enough of an investment to have influence on the founders? In other words, do you want to own a material portion of equity so that you have influence, but also do not get run over by other large investors? How does that go into your thought process? John, do you want to start on that one?
Yeah, so I mean, it's like anything else. You want to have a significant contribution to their success on the front end to be able to get their attention. So, I certainly wanted to be able to invest the fund in a company that would value that amount and would take that amount and run with it and go to bigger investors and basically grow it. So I think that was a very, very important part. In fact, early on, I remember having the conversation about, but will this company value this amount and what will they do with
it? And sorry, I was muted. And then another follow-up question to that is, someone wants to know, as investors, did you go into the process with already knowing what the range of your deal terms would be? And he gives us an example. Did the investors, for example, think, okay, any company that has a valuation or a value cap of more than 5 million, we're not interested, we're not going to invest? Which actually is interesting because that was an intense part of our conversation. And also he talks about, investing in stock versus a note versus a safe. Mitch, do you want to jump in on that?
Sure. Yeah. So, I want to also comment on the first question about, did we go in, with having some material influence? And for me personally, that's part of what I saw the value of doing it, this way through AngelCon, was because I didn't have the desire to put, a big enough chunk of my own money, to have a material influence in the company. But when you partner with other people and you've got a group like this, it does increase the influence you have. And I know, Judy, one of the things that we had talked about when we looked at the companies was the potential of having a board seat or having something like that. It was a request that we made.
Mhm.
So it did give us the ability to have, some influence over that. As far as, did we look at companies, that weren't going to have a market, a cap value over a certain size? We did have a lot of discussions over that, but I think it was kind of secondary because it wasn't like we went out looking for companies. The companies came to us. And what we did then was, we kind of looked at what structure were they open to for the investment. And what was surprising to me actually was a lot of companies came in already with, a safe that they had already set up or founded, or we were coming in, with other investors on a similar instrument. And it did come down to looking at, at the end, I think we had a couple different potentials that we were looking at. We did look at those cap values, and we did look at, was there a discount or was there a safe harbor for us or a favored nation or anything like that? So those things did come into consideration for us, but kind of in a reverse process, again, because we weren't out, looking, we didn't basically go out and pick the companies that we were going to narrow down from. They came to us. And so then it was a matter of kind of looking at the different terms that the ones had offered us. So it was all part of, it's one piece of the whole due diligence, I think is the way to say it.
Right. And at the end of the day, based on valuation caps, it was always like, again, back to, does it make sense? Does it fit the stage that they're in? Does it fit the industry that they're in? Does it, what are the trends? Looking at all those elements, right?
Judy, if I can add to that a little bit, for me being a real newbie, this whole thing was a black box to me. It's you put money in on one side and hopefully money comes out on the other side. I had honestly, many of these terms I was not familiar with. And so I had no expectations as far as what the return would look like. It was more of, will there be a return? And how do you pick the best one, the best horse, basically? So.
Right. Because the return, I mean, who knows, right? It's very high risk. Mitch, you made that point earlier. It's super early stage. But you do want to bet on the winning horse. We don't know how much you're going to win, but yeah, definitely.
The other thing with this too that I want to comment is, I might have gone into this with a little bit different intention than a lot of other people. I remember at the very beginning, Judy asking, okay, well, if this company does have some return, do we put that into another company, or does that? And you said no, it goes back to the investors. And I was a little like, oh, because my point of doing this was, one, for the learning and networking, and two, to help support local businesses. And startups. And I think it's fun and exciting. And, I've had the chance to go through and do my own company and grow. And it's fun to feel like I'm able to influence other people to do that as well. And I know Kristen was talking about this a little bit before we started the call. There's different reasons for doing this type of investing. Getting a return on the money that you put in is definitely one. But when you go in as a group like this, there are other things that you can do, because there's kind of a different purpose to that type of investing as well. So, while the return or the potential return, if there is one, is great, it wasn't, at least for me, the only reason that I was doing this.
So what, Mitch, what were your reasons? Like what were,
That's a good question. Originally, my reason was to help other local startups, to be able to have some influence. I've learned things in my life and I've had experiences, and just the hope to pass that on. One, because it's makes me feel like giving back somehow. And then also, I think it's fun and interesting to see the ideas that different people are coming up and the different companies, and to see that energy. Someone this morning was asking me, about, they said, oh, here's another great idea of a company that you could start that's in line with what I do. And I said, I don't want to start another company. I like the excitement of it and, the potential, but I don't want to do the work for it. So it gives me a way to feel involved without being involved.
That's right. So once you've done it, like, you know how hard it is. But yeah, and you're still being able to still be part of that world in a way that's super supportive, and helping coach these founders through some hurdles that you've probably already been through and seen. Yeah. Kristen, what motivated you to get involved and get started in this whole investing process?
Well, Judy, funny that you ask. So Judy was actually a funny little side story. Judy was in a meeting with my husband. My husband was the one that was focused on doing this, and mainly for networking purposes. We recently had moved back from the Bay Area, and now that our kids are in school again, and that's happening, we're venturing back out into the world. And I think for both of us being able to, so going back to Judy, I heard Judy and I was like, what are you guys talking about? I need to be involved. And then Judy was like, well, do you want to throw in an extra 5,000? And I was like, yes, I do. I want my own vote. I don't want my vote to be laying with my husband. Like, that's no way. Like, we can have different opinions. That's like just a marital fight waiting to happen. So we both got a unit, and that was kind of.
Let me ask you, so did you both end up voting for the same company?
We actually did end up voting for the same company. However, that decision shifted over, I would say, the final 3 days before we finalized our decision, and I made that final vote. But I think part of that was just the reason I got into this, and the reason, Judy, I heard your voice. My husband doesn't know always how to use his headphones. And so when we're in a shared space, everyone hears his conversations, and the conversation was just so inspiring. It was so motivating. And it was the first moment since early Airbnb days that I was like, ooh, someone's pouring Kool-Aid and I want to drink it, and I want to pour it for everybody else. And I'm a host and I want to bring everyone in. And, there's this energy that comes from the startup space, and it's attractive to me. It's inspiring. It's that spark underneath me that, those days, gosh, you wake up and you're like, God, the kids and the this and the this, and you're just like a hamster in a hamster wheel. But then you talk to someone who's excited, the investor group was the same way. It's all these like-minded individuals who have big picture thinking and want to learn and have this growth mindset and want to solve problems and support other people. And that energy is really what drew me to wanting to be a part of this. I think I want to get even closer to it. So I don't know how to do that, but I'm glad I started with the
Don't worry.
networking.
Liz and I have a plan for you and Mitch.
Perfect. But yeah, I think that was part of it. I think the other side of it, Mitch, you mentioned this, and I'm obviously a little behind you in my experiences. And John and I were talking about this when we joined. We were talking about all these similarities. I feel like I had a lifetime of a career already. And I really didn't want to go back to work. I really didn't want to. My husband kept saying, oh, you'd be a wonderful CEO. Go start your own company. And I was like, I don't want to do that work. I'm tired. I have 2 kids. I'm in a hamster wheel all day. I just can't do that. I think having the type of conversations, the energy that's in this space, no matter who you are in this space, it's contagious, it's innovative, going back to that, it's creative. I mean, there were some of these companies that, yes, could, we had a lot of debates on whether they were lifestyle companies or not, which was also a very new term to me. But they were all just that energy was there. Yeah. And that's, I think, why I wanted to be a part of this, and also just kind of learn the other aspects. Like I said, I'm very aware of what I do not know, finances and money, and, what makes sense financially. And I think starting as a consultant this last year and working for myself and having to talk about money and having to write master service agreements and contracts and all this stuff, it was a whole new world to me. And so now being able to have these contacts through this networking, it's amazing to be all the things we've learned, all the things we've been able to support. And even on the company side, I think what will make me come back to this is talking to those companies and having them go, oh my gosh, like so much stuff came out in the due diligence process that helped us organize our back end or our engineering side or our operational side or our marketing plan or our this or our that. And so being able to give back in that way, being able to provide innovative solutions, they've been in this for a long time. You know, a lot of these companies have been here for a little bit. So how do you get them to think of new ideas and support them in those ways? So all those.
Yeah, no, thank you. So we're coming to a close, unfortunately, but there's one more question. Stan summarized it. He said, okay, here am I, and here I'll end with one last question. He says, to summarize the takeaways, 3 top attributes: character of the founders, having what it takes; ability to communicate inspires; simplifying a complex idea to those unfamiliar with the industry; and traction that demonstrates revenue. And he says, are those the top priorities? What am I missing? So basically asking, any last words of wisdom to founders in what you're looking for as an investor. So John, do you want to start on that one? Last parting word of wisdom?
No, and I'm actually going to circle back in what Kristen said on the front end, which is you go with your gut. I think there's a lot of gut searching that you do, and that your experiences from that point back basically will guide you as far as what makes sense and what doesn't.
Right. Mitch, parting words.
No, I think Stan hit it pretty close. But also to echo John, when you're investing at companies at this stage, it's a lot of guesswork. Their revenue projections are guesswork. Their market projections are guesswork. Your idea of whether you think they can make it or not is guesswork. So it does come down to that gut instinct. But, if I had to look at those things, it would be, could they communicate clearly what they did? Do they have some traction? And do they seem like the people that can get it done? That's a pretty fair summary.
Thank you. And Kristen, do you want to add last words of wisdom for these founders?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add, and I think it's already kind of been said in a multitude of ways, but be authentic. I think there's the authenticity is a huge part of this, being able to share your vision and be authentic through that, but also be confident in and have the math work behind your projections, right? Like make sure everything actually adds up and work forward and backwards through your product. And also think about it from the user experience or the customer experience, or I think a lot of valuable information came out of talking about the customer side of it and the experience on the customer side. That was something that Peter really talked about as well. So going back to Tally 4, it's just another reason,
Thank you.
But yeah, great job, everyone.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. Thank you for being here this morning. And for our attendees, we just have one last slide to share with you. Okay, please take note, there is a Fund 5 that will be launched late August. So for startups that want to be considered for AngelCon in June of next year, if you're fundraising, if you're launching something and want to fundraise, there'll be an opportunity there again next year for sure. And anyone who wants to join as an investor, please feel free to contact us. You can contact us through slowsbdc@gmail.com. It's on the slide. And our big next event is Coffee and Conversation, July 14. We'll be doing a session on digital marketing. So more to come on that on our social media platforms, more information. Great to see everyone. Thanks again, Kristen, John, Mitch. Thank you so much for being here this morning. Really appreciate your time. And we'll see each other again real soon.